Have you ever tried to purge air out of radiant floor circuits, but you end up pushing it from one circuit to the other? Hi, I'm Gilles Legault, the CB Supplies go-to person for hydronic matters. Once you have purged the boiler and the near boiler piping, plus the supply and return lines to the manifold, it is now time to tackle the air elimination of the radiant circuits. Here is the method that should be considered. Here is a common floor heating manifold. The first thing that should be done is to make sure that it is isolated from the balance of the system. And how do you do that? Well, it's through the isolation valves on the supply and return lines. Then let's make sure that we shut off the automatic airflow vents. Then each one of the circuits has to be isolated or closed down on both the supply and the return side. Once that is done, then we can hook up the fluid to the fill purge ports of the manifold. One of them feeding the system with the fluid, and that one will be hooked on to either a submersible pump or a pump that you would use to empty a domestic hot water tank. The second one is the return to that bucket. Okay, so once all of that is done, we open up one circuit, only one circuit. We leave all the other ones closed, and we start the pump. We start to push the fluid into that circuit. And once we notice that there's no more bubbles coming back from that circuit, well, we shut off the pump. We then go on to doing this for each and every one of these circuits. So we close down the first one, we open up the second one, repeat the steps, close that one, open up the third one, repeat the steps. So you do that for all of the manifold. Now, let's have a look at a more specific application. In other words, doing such a system with the CB Supplies IVAR manifold. Here is the CB Supplies IVAR manifold. Once all of my system has been purged, when I say system, I'm thinking of the boiler, the near boiler piping, and the supply and return lines to the manifold. Once those are purged, our next step is going to be to purge the radiant floor. And how is that done? Well, by isolating this manifold. So the first step now is to isolate the manifold by closing off the supply and return lines. So now my manifold is completely isolated. Next step, let's close off the automatic airflow vent. And third, install our garden hoses. You're going to need two garden hoses, one for one of the fill purge port and a second one for the second fill purge port. One of them will be hooked on to a submersible pump or one of these pumps that we can use for eliminating water in domestic hot water tanks. And the second one is just a return to the supply bucket or to the fluid uh, so that we can see how much air is coming out of the system. Now, once they're hooked up, let's open up these fill purge ports. And that is done by using the Allen key, which is in the cap of that fill purge port on the bottom of the fill purge port. Okay, so we open up both of them. Both are open. Now we can start out the pump, starting to push fluid into that first circuit. All the circuits now are completely closed except for one circuit. So we're pushing fluid through. And once we see that the bubbles have stopped to come back into our supply bucket, then we stop the pump. Once that pump is stopped, we can shut down the first circuit and open up the second one. And we repeat the steps. We do this for each one of the circuits. I hope that this video answered some of the concerns that you might have on air elimination in radiant floors. For any other questions, we are at your disposal. CD Supply's team of experts is available for all of your hydronic needs. Looking forward to hearing from you.